Now hear me out, chess kids, and tell me if this pawn resembles your life at all. Have you ever been assigned math homework and spelling homework and reading homework? Wait, what's that? You go to a school that doesn't have homework? Well, you're a lucky kid, because I'm going to give you a little bit of homework today. We're going to talk about what it means to be overloaded. That is definitely a word that your parents know. This pawn is overloaded because it has too much to do. Notice this pawn is trying to guard the rook and also trying to guard the knight. That's kind of like when mom or dad has to pick you up from school and cook you dinner and do everything else that they do. By the way, you might want to tell them thank you every once in a while. In this position though, mom or dad, this pawn has too much to do because we're going to make it do one of its jobs and it won't be able to do its other job. Even though your mom is Superwoman, she cannot cook for you and pick you up from soccer practice at the same time. Or maybe she can. She is a superhero. In this position, let's first grab the rook. Rook captures rook. And of course, if black doesn't take back, thank you for the free rook. But if black does take back, the pawn is no longer doing its other job, which was, of course, guarding the knight. Now we capture the knight. We want ourselves a free knight, and white should go on to win the game. Now, I want to go back in this position. Sometimes in overloaded pieces situations, it matters a lot which one you capture first. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but guess what? I tricked you in this opening example. It matters quite a lot which one we take first, because if we capture the knight first in this position, it turns out black has several ways of saving everything and proving that mom is a superwoman. In this position, the rook can actually capture. Bishops and knights are worth about the same, so that was an equal trade. And of course, this pawn is no longer burdened by having to capture the rook because the rook doesn't need protection. Nothing is aiming at the rook. Let's go back. There was actually another superstar method of saving everything. You could play rook takes rook in this position, trading rooks, and then because it's check, when the king takes, then you could capture back. It was actually a giant equal trade, although for those superstar chess kids who are in the know, you know that a king and 3 pawns is probably going to defeat a king and 2 pawns. In fact, this pawn is so fast, you should probably just throw it up the chessboard and see if black can catch it. I don't think black will be able to. Okay, the better method was taking back with the rook, as I showed you in the first example. Let's move on to our next chess position. Now, a good way of trying to figure out whether or not something is overloaded or overworked, they mean the same thing in chess, is to first find an enemy piece that has at least one job and see if it has another job to do. In fact, in this next chess puzzle, one of black's pieces is guarding a physical piece, but it's also guarding a really important square. And you know what? That still counts as an overloaded piece. So, find a black piece here that is doing at least one job. Maybe you're thinking it's the pawn. The pawn is in fact guarding the bishop. The only problem is we're not actually aiming at the bishop, so I would not call that a real job. The queen is guarding a whole bunch of stuff, right? The pawn, the knight, the bishop, but white's not aiming at any of those pieces, so I would not count that as a real job. In fact, it is the knight. The knight, you can probably see, is guarding the rook. It is the only piece guarding the rook. That's a bad situation to be in because if the knight has any other job, then we're going to take advantage of the fact that the knight has too much homework. Can you see another job that this knight has? Pro tip, it's not actually defending any other piece, but it is defending an incredibly important square. By now, you've probably seen this bishop hiding on b2. Yeah, Funmaster might put it there on purpose. This queen is here.
Hello.
They're both aiming at dark squares. Guess what? Black has no dark squared bishop, so the dark squares are like Swiss cheese. And this bishop is cutting up that black king like Swiss cheese. The queen can travel to g7, and that would be checkmate if it wasn't for the knight. So now we just have to get the move order correct. Do we play queen g7 check on the first move and make the knight take us and then take the rook on the second move? Or do we take the rook on the first move, make the knight take us, and then hop in with our queen on the second move? Or does it simply not matter? Sometimes it doesn't matter. I'm going to let you think about what is the correct order of moves or if it matters. Well, what do you think, chess kids? Turns out it actually does matter. Now, rook takes rook is clearly the best move. For those of you voting for queen g7 or thinking that both moves worked, well, I've got a little secret to show you. Now, let's go over the correct answer first. Rook takes rook on the first move.
What?
And black virtually has to capture back, right? I guess black could technically block with the knight, but you would still just, I don't know, take the knight for checkmate or play queen g7 checkmate. So the knight is definitely moving here, whether it's taking the rook or not. And when the knight does move, now the knight is, of course, not doing its other job. Oh no! Somebody forgot to pick up your little sister at soccer practice. And now the queen hops into g7. The computer announces that it's checkmate, but you already know it's checkmate because the queen does all of the heavy lifting, but the bishop way down here in b2 is the helper of the queen. Now, for those of you thinking we could have inverted the moves and turned them upside down, what are we doing? We're turning the board upside down. No, we're not. Let's go back to regular chessboard. If we play queen to g7 check, this very, very nearly works, but close only counts in horseshoes, and I am not your horseshoes teacher. When this knight captures, which is the only move, and we play rook takes rook, it looks like it's going to lead to checkmate because black can block with the knight, and that's checkmate. Except that it isn't, because I very cleverly put the queen on this square to defend. The queen, of course, will come back and capture the rook, and now black has a queen, and you don't. So move order matters. Okay, we're going to move on, and now come another couple of examples, but these are taken directly from the ChessKid puzzles section. I went to our puzzles. I chose puzzles by theme. I chose overloaded piece. And here we go. These are puzzles that you can maybe get one day on ChessKid, right? So if you study this video, you'll get a couple of extra rating points maybe. Okay, we are white in this position, which means we've got to find a black piece that's doing too many things. And in fact, in this position, it's pretty straightforward. There is a black piece that is defending two other black pieces that we're attacking, and that, of course, is the queen. The queen is defending the bishop, which, of course, we are attacking. The queen is also defending the knight, which, of course, we are attacking. Now it's all about perspective. I mean move order. Which one should we capture first? If you're yelling at your screen saying, Fun Master Mike, all your arrows are confusing me, well, let's wipe the arrows off the board. Which one do we take first? It is the knight. For those of you who voted for bishop, I'm very sorry. If you play bishop takes bishop on the first move, now the knight will actually get itself out of danger and take the bishop back, and black loses nothing. In fact, black has a very strong attack on your king. And by the way, please don't go to f1. No! Queen takes f2 would be a pretty straightforward queen and helper checkmate. Let's go back and take a look at the correct move, which I know you chose, or if you didn't, that's okay, your secret is safe with me. Bishop takes knight on the first move. Now, if black just simply calmly takes back, of course, black is no longer defending the bishop, and it is 2 for 1 day in ChessKid YouTube. We got 2 minor pieces. It only cost us 1. White has an extra bishop. White should win the game. Now, for those of you thinking, hey, black could try something different, indeed, black can. Thank you for noticing. After we take this knight on move number 1, black could attempt bishop takes bishop. And in fact, if you are the black player in this game, you should at least try bishop takes bishop, because your opponent has to play very carefully to make the tactic work. A lot of kids might just take this bishop back, and then when black takes this bishop, it was actually just a giant trade. 2 minor pieces for 2 minor pieces, and black actually stands okay. Even though black might be down a couple of pawns, look at how weak the white king is. Look at how strong the queen is. She's aiming at that pawn. She's aiming at a bunch of other pawns as well. Let's go back. In this position, white could have actually played something called an in-between move. Not a topic we've covered recently in ChessKid YouTube, not in our tactics series, but for those of you doing your lessons on ChessKid website, you may have come across this term before. Are we going to take the bishop? Yeah, we are. But we're going to do an in-between move first. We're going to save our bishop and then come back and take the black bishop later. But we need to save our bishop and gain a tempo. You can't just go to some random square, because if you do, then this bishop get a chance to save itself. So instead, we're going to save our bishop by dropping it back to the square g3. And now black's in a bad spot. Black, of course, must save the queen. She's your best piece, but the bishop is going to be a goner. Even if the queen comes down to threaten a checkmate, we're not going to let that happen, because rook takes bishop, wins a piece, stops the checkmate, and white wins the game. By the way, for those of you superstars out there, apparently there's another winning move in this position. You could play the very strange rook to e4, or maybe it's not so strange, because maybe you just watched my previous video on discovered attacks, and you know that if black tries to save the bishop in this position, we can move our bishop and make a discovered attack, but I actually don't think this is quite as clear earlier, because I don't think there's any kind of rock star discovered attack coming on the next turn. So keep it simple. Bishop g3 is the best move, although rook e4 probably wins in the long run anyway. We're all about simplicity, though, in ChessKid land. Okay, here's another one from the ChessKid puzzle section. And here, even though we are black, we're going to look at the white army first. A lot of chess is looking at your opponent's pieces, what they're doing, what formations they're in, and how you can take advantage of them. Can you find me a white piece that is defending two other white pieces that we're attacking? This one, I think, is pretty easy by now. I bet you picked up on the fact that it was the bishop. The bishop's guarding the queen. We are aiming at white's queen. Bishop's also guarding the knight. We are aiming at white's knight with our rook down here. So now it's just a matter of move order, and yes, it still matters, okay? Queen takes queen is the best move. The bishop has to take, otherwise, free queen, thank you very much. And now the bishop is not where it needs to be to defend the knight. So the rook captures the knight, and black ends up with a bonus knight. If we try it in reverse, rook takes knight. Now white will save himself by playing an in-between move. White can play queen takes queen. We pretty much have to capture back, otherwise we're down a queen. And then white takes our rook. And if you look at the chessboard, white has two rooks. We only have one. That didn't work out. Move order matters, kids. Okay, this is the next puzzle from the ChessKid puzzle section, and it just goes to show you there are overloaded pieces even in endgames. In this position, we're going to show you how an overloaded pawn can lead to a breakthrough. Now, it's 3 pawns against 3 pawns, and it looks like this black pawn is going to start marching down the board to make a queen. So white must act very quickly, and there's only one move for white. We need to play the move pawn to g4 and get moving and grooving over there on the king's side. Now, we're about to capture, and it's going to lead to a very similar chess position as what I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and have black capture white. We're going to make this pawn overloaded. What is this pawn doing right now? Well, it's stopping our f pawn from marching down the board. If we move our pawn, this guy just takes. But wait a minute. We can also use our h pawn to walk up the board, and this pawn's responsible for guarding the h pawn's advance. So, pawn to h5. Now, black can't really do anything with this pawn. It's playing defense. This pawn is simply stopped by the king. It's waiting for it like a crocodile with an open mouth. So black has nothing better to do than to push this a pawn down the board. But now this pawn is overloaded. It's trying to stop 2 white pawns from walking down the board. It's actually guarding 2 squares, and that definitely counts as an overloaded piece. You can actually push either pawn to win. However, it is, I think, a little bit easier if you push the h pawn, because that way when black takes and then we push this pawn, we're going to end up promoting on a square where it delivers check. Now, you might think black still has a chance with this whole collection of pawns, but let me show you how white should win. a4, f7, black might as well continue with a3 to get the pawn going on the way to the queen, but that pawn's never going to make it. Pawn to f8 queen is check. And when the king moves, the king might as well keep supporting the pawn. You actually have time to capture this pawn. And if black's pawn moves down the board once more, you can move your queen anywhere along this diagonal and stop the pawn. Queen h8 might be the prettiest. And then the king can't even get to b2 to support the pawn. The king's just going to move somewhere. And then if you're white, move your queen all the way down, blockade the pawn, and then you're going to win by using your king to come capture this pawn. Then your king is going to walk all the way over to the left side of the board and assist the queen in capturing this pawn. That's a little bit of an endgame lesson thrown into our overloaded lesson. No charge for that, chess kids. I like to, leave you with something extra. Okay, here's our final puzzle from the ChessKid section, and then we're going to transpose, as they say. We're going to look at real-life overloaded tactics from Grandmaster chess games. Yes, even Grandmasters could probably benefit from watching the ChessKid videos we have here. Okay, in this position, it's a little bit harder because we actually have to set up the overload on move 1 and then execute the overload on move 2. We're black, and notice in this position the queen is defending the rook, but we're not even threatening the rook. However, we're going to use our discovered attack idea from our previous video. Yes, that's right. All of my videos come together in one giant ChessKid universe. We're going to discover attack the rook, but we're also going to attack another piece that the queen's going to be responsible for defending. And by now, you've probably realized the correct move is bishop to d7. Discover attack on the rook, but our bishop is also going to be aiming at the white bishop when the queen moves. But now we have a classic overload. We set it up on move 1. Now we're going to actually do it on move 2. The queen is guarding the rook and guarding the bishop. We're aiming at both pieces. And again, the move order matters. I'm not even going to show you the wrong move order on this one. We're only going to look at the correct move order. Rook takes rook on move number 1. And if the queen takes, we simply take the bishop on move number 2, and we have won a piece. By the way, white could have captured your bishop instead of your rook, but now we have rook versus bishop, and the rook is already on an open file, and the rook is just going to dominate this position. Rook check, and when the king moves, you can even come take this pawn, and black is not only ahead on points, but black is totally winning. Okay, now we're going to move on. We're going to look at 4 Grandmaster games where an overloaded piece was used to win material. Here's our first example, and it's actually a relatively simple one. In this position, black decided, hey, rook's not doing anything. Let's wake him up! Wake up, rook! Rook to c8, double attacking this pawn. Now, white actually had a couple of reasonable moves. White could have maybe slid this rook over. Another nice move for white is actually to play bishop to d3 to attack the queen and take away the queen's attack of this rook. Why is the queen's attack of this rook important? Well, as I like to say, that's called foreshadowing, kids. It's not just for Charles Dickens. Fun Master Mike uses it as well. White made a big mistake here. Instead of doing either of those moves, white moved the other rook, this one over here, to come to c1. Now, normally I'm a big fan of bringing new pieces in the game. The problem is that rook has gone from relatively sleepy to awake, but way too busy. Have you ever woken up with your alarm clock and realized, oh no, I'm late for school. I have to brush my teeth. I forgot to do my math homework, all that stuff. Well, guess what? You are the rook on c1 in this position. Unfortunately, this rook is trying to guard this rook in case the queen captures.
Hello.
But now we just burdened this rook by having to try to guard this pawn. And it's relatively simple. The way to take advantage of everything is just to capture the pawn. And unfortunately, white loses a pawn. Because if the rook ever captures, either now or at a later moment, the queen will take. Even if the bishop takes here, now black can recover the piece by playing rook takes bishop. And if you take my rook, I get my rook back by playing queen takes. And once you do all the math, you see that black actually has an extra pawn. Don't believe me? Well, we just had the ChessKid auditing team come and remind us that this e-pawn is an extra pawn. Doesn't sound like much, but in the hands of a Grandmaster, one pawn often wins the game. Okay, here's our next example. Yes, it is another endgame. Yes, overloaded piece can happen at any moment in the game. And we have a very famous player playing the black piece. His black is Victor Korchnoi, or Korchnoi, depending on how you want to put the emphasis. Now, Victor, you may or may not know, he was so close to being world champion several times. And I want to say that he is going up the board. That may look a little bit weird, but remember, if you're black, your pawn would begin on the number 7. Now it's way up here on the number 2. So his pawn is one step from promotion, okay? Black is facing this white pawn, which is coming down the board and is 2 steps from promotion. Now, Victor makes a very clever first move. There's actually a couple of winning moves here, but I think his move is definitely the coolest. He plays king to d3, and he's very simply going to march his king down the board to d2, then he's going to promote the pawn and force the rook to give himself up. Now, white played what looks like the most reasonable counterplay. White says, hey, I got a pawn too. White pushed the pawn down the board, trying to get a queen himself. But now, watch what Victor did. He realized that this rook is the only piece stopping this pawn from becoming a queen. But because this pawn just landed on h7, notice that rook to f8 would be an Arabian mate because the king can't run away, except for this rook. Oh, wait a minute. That means this rook on c8 is overworked. Yes, he actually waited for the pawn to come down to h7 to make the c8 rook overloaded, and he played the very simple pawn to c1 queen. And now here, white just resigned, because white is either going to play on down a queen, which is totally losing. By the way, if white promotes the queen, black has several winning moves. Queen takes, rook wins. Queen to g5 is actually going to be mate in a couple of moves, okay? But let's go over the main line, which is if the rook takes, we have a very cool pawnless checkmate. No pawns, no problem. Rook to f8 is an Arabian mate, and notice he waited for the pawn to land on h7 to make sure that this was checkmate. I really love that game. Our final two examples come from the same player. The first one is a little bit easier, but then we're going to graduate to the harder one. Black is none other than Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, many times US champion, very popular chess streamer, and you know what? He's got a pretty good YouTube channel too. But don't go running off over there just yet, because he is going to teach us on our channel through the power of overloaded games. Okay, these are actual games that he's played. Now, he was black in this position. Can you find me, though, a white piece that is guarding too many things? It is, in fact, the rook. The rook is trying to guard this pawn, and all of Nakamura's pieces are trained on that pawn. But this rook is also trying to guard this pawn, which Nakamura's rook is aiming at. So Nakamura played the relatively simple rook takes pawn, winning a pawn, and if the rook were to take back, then bishop takes f3 would actually win the white queen. Notice if white does not take back, bishop takes f3 is actually still a threat. For example, if white just goes la-da-da-da-da and pushes a pawn, we can play bishop takes f3 because the rook is pinned, and remember, a pinned piece does not protect. And after queen takes, and you actually can't take my queen. That rook, if it tries to take, it's pinned. And if the king tries to take, well, there's a rook down here waiting, so Nakamura, of course, went on to win this game. And our final example, we're staying with Hikaru. This is one of his most famous chess games. It may have been covered somewhere else in ChessKid YouTube land, but here we're going to focus on the overloaded piece. Now, Nakamura's queen is in danger. It may only be maybe once in a lifetime where you just leave your queen in danger like this without even giving a check. Nakamura does just that. He leaves his queen in danger and plays bishop to h3. Is he a madman? No, he's a genius. If the pawn takes the queen, we have bishop to g2 checkmate this poor king in the corner of the board. So, white decided to defend the checkmate in one of the few ways that he could and played bishop to f1. But now Nakamura says, you know what? Your bishop is a little bit overloaded. It's trying to guard the checkmate, but it's also trying to guard a very important invasion square for our queen. And Nakamura plays queen to d3, overloading this bishop. Now, you might also say, Fun Master Mike, isn't that also called deflection or decoy? Yeah, it's true. Sometimes chess terms get a little bit all mixed up. I don't care what you call it, though. It's just a great move. But we are not done with overload. First of all, if the bishop takes the queen, thank you very much for the checkmate. If the bishop takes the bishop, well, because my queen got to an awesome square, we're not even going to capture the knight. Oh, no. We're just going to take this pawn, and it's checkmate in one. When the bishop blocks, queen takes. So we need to go back to this position. We can see this bishop is definitely overloaded. Now, white tried knight takes e5, trying to guard this pawn and trying to get the queen out of that square. But Nakamura played the very simple and still very pretty bishop takes, leaving his queen in danger again. And by now you figured out, if the knight takes, the bishop drops back for the checkmate on g2. So, what did white do in this position? White played queen, takes f1, but the problem is the queen was overloaded. White has to stop the checkmate somehow, but by taking with the queen, it no longer defends the knight. So, even white's queen was overloaded in this position. After the queen takes, Nakamura took this knight. He's no longer really down any material. He's still got an incredibly strong attack on the white king, and he went on to win the game. So there you go, chess kids. We learned two things today. When one of the enemy pieces is overloaded or overworked, figure out which job you want to make it do, because once it does that job, it won't be doing its other job. So the next time you hear mom or dad plop themselves on the couch and say, "I'm so overloaded," why don't you offer to give them a hand?